And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Carry Out Conversations. I'm John.
I'm Dave.
I'm Noah.
It is great having you here listening to us. We are going to jump right into this one. This is part 2 of our last episode.
I don't remember what it was supposed to be called.
This one, lamb chops.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
What was the last one?
Feed my sheep.
Feed my sheep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Noah was very intelligent about bringing that one.
I don't know if the word intelligent is an apt description of anything I do, but I think lucky is a good...
Okay, he was clever. He was clever.
Let's do that, yeah.
Okay.
Clever girl.
Don't call me a girl. I identify
It's a
as-
Jurassic Park.
I
Yeah,
identify
even I
as-
got that one.
Yes, I know it's a Jurassic Park reference,
Okay,
but I
then
don't
take it and
identify...
just go.
I don't identify as a velociraptor.
You should. What about a Velocipaster? It's a very horrible movie if you've ever seen it.
I haven't seen it. I want to, though.
Velocipaster is true cinema. It's better than Schindler's List.
Wow.
I still want to make my movie Reverend Deadshot.
I'll watch it.
Okay. You want to star in it?
No. I don't want my name associated with a movie called Reverend Deadshot.
Why? It'd be awesome.
What's our budget? Negative $48.
Yeah, you have to pay
Yeah,
to
I have
work
to
in
pay
the
to work
movie.
there.
By day, a man of God. By night, a man you don't want to cross.
Wow.
Da-da.
Wow. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, I'd watch it. Anyway, all right, getting right into this one. Last time we basically touched on little kids in church. Hold on. That did not come out the way I expected it to.
Are you sure?
I did. That did not come out the way I was expecting it to come across.
You better leave that in, Dave. If you cut that out, I'll be so pissed.
Last time we talked about the goodness. I can't even come across because now I just see Noah's face.
It is hilarious.
Yes.
Noah's face, you know.
Yes.
You can't look at it or you burst out in laughter.
So
Right.
you're saying what about children?
Let me try this again.
Okay. I cover my mouth. Step away from the microphone.
We talked about little kids in the church and the way that they are taught. That's what I meant to say. The way that they are taught by teachers. And we did kind of like talk a lot about kids and like the kids ministry and stuff like that in churches. Kind of got into about like the different pastors, the way pastors are. Some of them, you know, the versus the way they were back, you know, 100, even 50 years ago, versus a lot of the pastors that are in there now. You know, we're not really going to get deep into that one. Just kind of, you know, a quick update. If you haven't listened to the last episode, please go do, because it was very intriguing, very, very interesting. This time we're going to talk a lot about the other side of the church, the congregation. And what I mean by that is we kind of, I believe that a lot of the church problems, where some of them are in the leadership part, a lot of the church problems are the people in the church. Now, I'm not one of those to say, you know, everybody in the church should be perfect, because we know that's not going to happen.
There was only one who was perfect.
Yes.
I wasn't going anywhere with that. Just
Oh, okay.
All right.
Well, I think it's important to know that the church is a hospital. It's
Mhm.
full of sick people.
Yep.
And, you know, people in the church should be striving to make themselves better and to, you know, model their lives after Christ. But it's a process of doing so.
Mhm.
You know, just because you have faith or call yourself a Christian doesn't mean that the things you struggle with are going to instantly become easier. Like, it's not always easy to be patient with people or be loving or kind to people just because you now call yourself something.
Mhm.
And so that's why, you know, we need to be aware that the church is full of people who need the church, right?
Right.
So
Right. they're like you said, and it makes me think of in the gospel where the Pharisees are sitting there and they're the high priests and things, and they're watching Jesus dine with the dirty. They're watching him dine with the poor, the sick, the needy. And they even come to him and be like, "Why are you doing this? Like, you shouldn't have anything to do with these people. They're the outcasts. They're the ones that nobody wants to mess with." And Jesus even says, and I know I'm paraphrasing it all, but Jesus even said, like, "I've come to heal the sick,
not the healthy."
Not the healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you don't if you are healthy, you don't go to a hospital and check into the emergency room, and be like, "Oh yeah, I'm in good health. I just want you to see that." No, you
Unless
go
you're a
when
terrible person.
Thanks, Doc.
Yes, unless you're a terrible
Just
person.
here to let you know I'm healthy.
Yeah. You go when you're sick.
Mm-hmm.
You go when when you have to or when you need to. And the same thing with church. Now, I'm not saying it because this is like a very fine line here. You can't just go when you need it, but at the same time, when do you go?
Right. Well, and that's there's, in one sense, you could say we always need it because no one's ever perfect, right? So there's and yet, there's also a sense in which the church is more than just a hospital, because part of what we do within the church is we help one another, right? So maybe this isn't the perfect analogy, but you think of like a mass casualty event, like.
Yes, let's think about that.
No, but like people who are less injured help those who are more injured in mass casualty events, right? And so somebody who has struggled with a particular sin and by the grace of God has overcome that sin or has made progress in overcoming that sin, it is then good and proper for them to help one another in that. And so there is a sense in which it is a communal thing, to where even if you have dealt with a lot of the problems that initially led you into the church, that is not now an excuse for you to take time away from it, but you almost have a duty to serve others who were where you were, right? Not in like a judgmental way, but in a genuine way.
Right. And something my pastor, and I'm just going to throw his name out there. Pastor Graham, Ken Graham. He was my pastor for most of my life. It doesn't matter what church I go to now. It doesn't matter what church I served in or anything like that. He will always be my pastor. I mean, this man has taught me more than anybody ever has. And something he used to always say, he goes, "The moment you feel that you have arrived as a Christian, you have not arrived." And what he means by that is we get to that point, we want to strive to be the best that we can. We want to strive to be, the best Christian, to be closer to God. And it's that moment that you feel that's like, "Oh, I'm here." That's when you need to check on yourself, because you've got a long ways to go. And it kind of reminds me too, because a lot of people in the church, they get into this point where they're like, "Well, I'm comfortable where I'm at, so I'm just going to stay here." And we, and I say we, because I'm guilty of it myself, of we kind of get into this complacency of, godliness, where we don't want to move any further because we're comfortable where we are. And that's usually when things start to go wrong. What is it? Psalms 1. I'm gonna look it up because I'm gonna mess it up if I don't.
About, blessed is the man who's meditates on. Or sorry, no. Psalm 1, you said?
Yeah, Psalm 1. Sorry, I'm gonna look it up really quick. Just because it's one of those verses that I know, but at the same time, for whatever reason, it's just kind of like.
Can't quote for
I'm not.
I feel the same way right now. The thing I wanted to bring up is in 1 John, John talks about the spirit of Antichrist being the one who says they have no sin, right? And so when the standard for us isn't our neighbor, it's not, oh, well, I'm not as bad as that guy over there, right? One, because you probably are, but two, because the standard by which we are measured is Christ.
Right.
The standard is perfection.
Right.
And so, we cannot get into this mode of, oh, well, I'm comfortable now. Well, no, because you're not perfect, right? And there isn't a sense in which we need to be aware we won't be perfect. And that's kind of where grace comes in, right? Is knowing that we need to look outside of ourselves. But to strive to be as close to that perfection as we can in this life is necessary. And in that sense, there's not really there's no break from holiness.
Right.
Like holiness is not something you pick up one day and then leave the next. And that's why people think Christians are hypocrites, is because one, we are. We're sinful people and we are often hypocrites.
Right.
But it's because of that, the times in our lives where we fail and we set aside our holiness some days. And it's just like, it's sad to see, but that's why people have perceptions about Christians that they have.
Right.
Because it's partially based in truth.
I'd say it's more than a little bit. It's more than partially. It's very, I don't want to say significantly, but it's more than partial. Yeah.
The thing that I think it is a straw man to say that official Christian doctrine is that because we are perfect, we need to tell people outside of the church how to live. Now, there are people who act that way, but they're doing that in opposition to classical Christian teaching, not that coming out of it. Because the classical Christian teaching would be, hey, I'm messed up, and I'm trying not to be messed up. I'm never going to be perfect.
Oh, we're all messed up here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when people look at Christians, you would hope the thing they would say is, oh, like they're Christ-like, but they still have issues. Like that's what we want to be perceived as kind, loving, and caring, but not snooty. I mean, obviously there's going to be some hypocrisy because we worship perfection and we're not perfect.
Yeah.
But trying to limit our hypocrisy is important,
Right.
which is what Jesus always talked about, is not being hypocrites.
Yeah. When's the last time you saw your local Karen who swears she believes in Jesus actually do something Christ-like, like help somebody in need,
Yeah.
And unfortunately, those are the most prevalent examples, is people like that who are all preachy and you know the saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. They're loud.
Yeah.
So they're the ones that are unfortunately representing us because that's what everybody sees. Because like we were talking about on the last one, what's more interesting, a car crash or a day where nothing goes wrong?
Yeah, exactly. People like the scandal,
Right.
It draws eyes. And also,
so the Christians who are actually helping the needy don't get any attention, and those who swear they're Christians but are quick to judge.
there's nothing scandalous about the church doing things right.
No.
There's nothing interesting about that.
The thing
for
about
people.
it is, like what Dave just touched on, it's like, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. The ones that are out there saying, well, I'm doing this. Look what I'm doing for the church. Look what I'm doing for God. Those are usually the ones that everybody sees, and they're usually the ones that cause people not to want to come to church.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, if every Christian's like that, why would I want to be
I wouldn't
one
want
of
to
those?
associate with those people either.
It's I remember. No, let me step back just for a second. I want to read this verse because I just found it. Really quick. It is from the King James version. That is my preferred version. I know a lot of people have different ones. Mine. I always grew up King James, and that's just what I follow. But Psalms 1:1, it says, "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful." And what that verse is meaning is, you notice that there's a degradation in sin. You start off by walking to the point where you slow down. You start to get the ungodly counsel. You start to get the people that are like, well, you could do this. It's okay. And we'll talk about this more too, because I know we kind of touched on it last week as well. But you get this where people are like, well, if you live this certain way, it's not going to hurt anything. So you start to walk and you start to slow down to the point where you're standing still. And then you're standing there in your sin, basically being like, well, okay, I'm comfortable. And that's what we were talking about before, of we get to this point where we're just comfortable being in our lives, to now we're sitting down, and we're so complacent that we don't want to be moved. And that could go in multiple different ways. It could go as far as a sinful lifestyle of, you get to that point where, you almost become numb to it. I had this discussion with one of my friends here recently about conviction, and what conviction means. And we can talk about this as well. But about what conviction is and what conviction means. And to me, conviction is whether or not it happens before the sin, during the sin, after the sin. It's God touching your heart, basically telling you, you shouldn't be doing this. Mm-hmm. That was wrong, and there's times where we kind of get into this mode where we're like, we do something that we know is wrong, but we're just like, oh, well, God will deal with it later. And we become complacent to the point where we become numb to that conviction, and we're so comfortable in that sin that we're like, well, I'm here, I'm not gonna move. That also leads into another episode that we have talked about before, that we'll do soon, about addictions, and how once we get into an addiction, it's so hard to get out of it.
And even once you do, that doesn't mean you're suddenly not addicted to the thing anymore.
Right. You're always going to have that temptation. You're always going to have that, that draw that wants to draw you back. But we'll move on into, we also kind of get complacent in our Christian life, where, a lot of people, and it happens more like the older we get, we start to kind of get comfortable with where we are, and we're just like, well, I don't really want to move. I don't really want to do anything else other than what I'm doing for God or for the church. And so I'm just going to sit here and just be, a pew person. And that's all I'm going to be, because God will bless that. God, somebody else will do this work for us. Somebody else will, sweep the floors. Somebody else will clean out clean the gum off the bottom of the pews. Somebody else will go tell, these people about God. It's like, I'll be there and I'll support them.
What's really sad about the church, and I'm sure not all churches are like this. I'm sure some of them are more dispersed, but at least what I saw in my own church was you would have one person serving in 7-8 different ways throughout the week. Yep. And then you'd have people doing almost nothing. Yep. And you may have you essentially have 5% of the people doing 95% of the work. Mm-hmm. And not everyone is called to the same ways of service. Certain people serve through custodial means, or repairs, or mowing the lawns of old people, or whatever, right? But to not serve at all, it's not just that the church and the people around you are lacking something, but you're not getting the maturity that would come from setting aside your own desire to serve and love somebody else.
Right.
It is the desire to not do it is a selfish desire. And so service will have a positive impact on you, even if it's not what you want to do in the immediate. Mm-hmm. One of the other things I wanted to say is, when you brought up previously the people who are trying to show off their holiness, it reminds me of the verse where Jesus is talking about the Pharisees. And the Pharisees, it's not like they would just pray in public like some people do before a meal, Mm-hmm. But they would chant prayers out in the street and essentially recite an entire liturgy out in the street, so that people would see how holy they are, right? And when they would fast, they would purposely make themselves look sickly so people would see how much they're suffering and see how holy they are. And what Jesus says in that is, the Father will reward what he sees you do in private.
Right.
Right. So it is not bad to be holy, but it is bad to be holy for the sake of being seen. Mm-hmm. And you can be an active member of your community and be an upright Christian person without making it about you. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, you have to balance that, especially people in ministry. I know we're primarily focused on the congregation, but even especially people within ministry being selfless because you're more in the public eye. Mm-hmm. So,
well, and I think of, like another church that I had visited multiple times. They had a sign over their back door that said, "Your ministry starts here." And what they mean by that is, you're a member of that church, you are in the ministry. You may not be called to teach, you may not be called to preach, but like you said, going out, telling others about God. Down south, I know it's not prevalent up here, at least I haven't seen.
Door to door. Thank God.
Yes. Well, and see, okay, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But down south, it's a very big thing. We don't go door to door preaching. We go to invite other people to church. Checking up on the people that haven't been there in a while.
Sure.
Hey, I just found out you're in the hospital. I wanted to come see how you're doing. That type of thing.
Sure.
And up here, it's like you don't see it. But it was like, that sign above that church door, it made me, it really spoke to me because, the moment you step outside of that church door, people are watching you. People know if you're a Christian or you're not. And if they don't, there's a problem. I mean, if you are a Christian, if you are saved, if you have accepted Christ as your Savior, and, you have gone to church, for, years, and the people around you don't know that you're a Christian, there's an issue. Mm. And it's like, and I struggle with it myself every day. I'm not saying that I'm that way because, it's like, I know there are times where I do not present myself as a Christian the way that I should. Mm-hmm. But that should actually convict us of knowing that people are watching your life every single day. Mm. And you very well as a Christian could be the determining factor of someone turning their life over to God or not. And so on that, I want to revert back to what you had what we just kind of talked about for a second. Door to door. What are your thoughts on this as people, that have had it happen or, that have gone and done it, that type of thing? I mean, I'm opening it up to both of you guys. What are your thoughts on this?
So I'm not going to say there's no benefit to it. I'm sure people have met someone at the door and been invited to church, went to church, learned about the Lord, got saved. That's great. I'm not denying that happens. I think there's better methods to do that. And I think you can also separate door-to-door evangelism from checkups, right? I do think there is a sense in which it's fine for the church to go check up on someone they haven't heard from in a while. Maybe you haven't heard from them in a while because they're grieving. Mm-hmm. Maybe they lost someone in their life and they're mm-hmm. grieving, or they have some other need that wasn't met at the church. And so it's fine to go follow up and check on people in a loving manner. But I don't think the door-to-door evangelism is the ideal way to do it. I think there's a lot better ways to reach people. One of the things that I've found in my personal life is I have led more people to God by being willing to answer questions and just having the conversation of spiritual things be something we talk about generally within friend groups and things like that. And I've seen a fair amount of success that way, but I think more often than not, door-to-door preaching or evangelism, not preaching but evangelism, leaves kind of a sour taste in people's mouth. Also, the people doing the evangelism, because we talked about this in the last episode, the American church is extremely uncatechized, extremely uneducated. The door-to-door minister, or people in the congregation, maybe if they're doing it, how equipped are they to answer the questions that might be asked? Mm-hmm. And especially if they're under-equipped, you know, like you have some guy come to your door and tell you about Jesus, you ask him 3 questions, he can't tell you nothing. It's like, you know.
That's going to drive you further away from the church.
Exactly. Even if they knocked, like people don't like anyone knocking on their door anyway. And maybe that's a problem with modern
especially
society.
in this day and age.
Yeah, maybe,
I was just about to say.
And maybe that's not the attitude we should have, but it is a fact that is the attitude people have.
This is why I want to live in a castle at the center of a labyrinth. Let's see the Jehovah's Witnesses get through that.
So
well, okay, and see that I think is where a lot of the sour taste comes from. Is you get, you know, like the Jehovah's Witness, you get Mormons, you get Catholics, you get Pentecost, Baptists, you get all of these different people that are coming.
But no Ewoks talking about C-3PO. I'm disappointed.
I will say that, and to be the advocate of the of door-to-door,
door-to-door Ewoks?
Wasn't for yes, if it wasn't for the door-to-door ministry, nobody in my family would be in church. I mean, I will attest to that. You know, it's like my I've heard my parents say it multiple times, you know, that, my dad was sitting at home and it just happened to be somebody coming in and be like, hey, we want you to come to church. We'll come pick you up on the bus. And so they did. And so, because of that, both of my parents got saved. My grandparents got saved. Later on, it's like my parents got married. Obviously, I'm here. It's like I've been in church, it's like, and it got to the point where I was saved.
I thought the story was going to end with you being a Satanist. Like, my parents got saved. My grandparents got saved.
And then I met Satan.
Yeah.
And then after I met Satan, then this guy came to my door and he's like, hey, stop worshiping Satan, come to church. And then I went to, no, I'm kidding. That's not.
Yeah, no.
Sorry to cut you off, but.
No. But, it's like, and I see, I mean, and the reason why I'm saying that is I was able to personally lead my daughter to Christ. Mm-hmm. And, it's like, and it wasn't from a door to door. I mean, obviously my daughter lived with me.
You walk outside.
We literally sat in the medicine aisle of Walmart on the floor. And her and I, because she started to get sad for a little bit. And I got to talking to her about it. And I mean, I'm talking, this little girl was about 5 or 6 years old. Mm-hmm. Now, I know some people are like, 5 or 6 years old, they don't know the difference, blah, blah, blah. I believe they do. Mm-hmm. I believe that when God is ready for you to know the difference between right and wrong, it can happen at any time. Some people don't even reach that till they're 30s or 40s. I mean, it's like there's that age of accountability is what it's called. But me and my daughter are sitting there in the middle of Walmart, and she starts to get really sad. And so I start to talk to her about it, and and she just tells me, she goes, I don't want to go to hell.
Fair enough.
It's like, whoa, it's like at 5 years old, it's like this is crazy, So I start
to pull that out,
Right, exactly. So I start to talk to her, and her and I literally sat down on the floor in the middle of Walmart, and and I led her in prayer. Now I know that there are people on the outside of this who think like, oh, you basically told your daughter what to say and blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, I told her what to say.
That's what all teaching and instruction is, actually.
Right.
Like that's why I hate the argument of like, that's indoctrination. Everything's indoctrination.
Right.
That's what information is.
Right.
Like, just shut up.
Unless you have somebody who literally can't remember what you said yesterday. and you have to teach them again and again and again.
Yes. Yes.
That's just an unteachable person, Dave.
And
Yes,
there are quite a few of those. There's quite a few
those
Christians
exist,
like that.
yes.
Yeah. But I literally sat with her and I told her, I'm like, okay, this is, if you want to accept Christ, this is what you can say.
Mm.
And so as I would say like a line, she would repeat it. And, and to this day, it's like, I just remember this, and, I'll ask her like if you were to die today, where would you go? Automatically, I'm going to heaven. Like, how do you know? Because I sat down at this time, and she can remember it too. Like, we may not remember the exact date, but we remember exactly where we both were, and she can spot on tell you, what happened. And that I honestly believe that she accepted Christ as her Savior at that point. And I say all of that because here it is 3 generations later. If it wasn't for somebody coming to my dad's doorstep from some church and just saying, hey, we want you to come, none of this would have happened.
Right. And I wasn't saying that God can't use, because obviously the way ministry works is, hey, you talk to someone. So if they're at your door, you can talk to them,
right.
But I just think there are more ideal ways to have those conversations and better context too, but I'm not saying it doesn't have fruits. That's not what I'm saying at all.
So what would be another way?
Yeah, so like one of the examples I gave was interpersonal discussions, but also using the platforms we have. So we have the internet,
TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook,
right, and
that kind of stuff.
And the problem with that is just like you have in the, when you talk to people, there's different opinions out there, right? And so me saying one thing online, I'm also going to have an atheist and a Catholic and Pentecostal saying X, Y, and Z different, right?
And they're all going to say you're wrong.
Yeah, they will, and they're right. I'm wrong on a lot of things, but I don't think I'm wrong on the essential things for sure. I don't think I'm wrong on those, but using the tools we have there, I also think having not so like I want to distinguish between entertainment and like community interaction. So I think there's a difference between like, hey, come to this Christian concert and get your emotions stirred up and then call that religion, But I think, not that that's in every case the worst thing ever, but, or at least the concert part, not the false belief part. But like community engagement. So, like service stuff, like going to soup kitchens. Okay, we're going to go to soup kitchens and feed people. And the people serving would be an example of Christ. And that's a good, like you're showing your disposition to serve. That might be a good context to talk to people. One of the things my church used to do is a lot of churches in the area would take a week to house the homeless. And while they were doing that, we would feed them and we would give them places to sleep and then try and hook them up with some jobs also. And those service opportunities are opportunities where you can share the gospel with somebody. So yeah, I would say the internet, interpersonal dialogue, and then service would be the main 3. Okay. But you can come up with more than that.
Well, and I wanna kind of play the opposite side here for a second.
Sure.
So go into one, we'll say, okay, the internet. It is a good tool. Obviously without the internet, we wouldn't be having this discussion, and our listeners wouldn't be listening to this.
We'd be having this discussion, but our listeners wouldn't be listening.
Our listeners wouldn't.
We wouldn't have listeners.
Well, the way Dave has this set up is you type in a 1-800 number, it just plays the most recent episode.
Don't tempt me.
No. But and I even use it. It's like my personal TikTok page. Is kind of my ministry of being able to get out there. Mm-hmm. But how many or how effective is it when you have so many other things vying for people's attention at that point? Mm-hmm. We've talked about this before.
Yeah,
there's
I think we touched on this on the last one.
Yeah, there's that overstimulation of, it's like I'm scrolling through TikTok and I'm seeing something about, prayer There's a Bible verse. Oh, here's a girl that I, like to stare at. Or here's a funny video of somebody falling flat on their face. I mean, you know what I'm saying here. It's like there's those different things that kind of grasp our attention, and we are so short attention that at what point does the internet work against you, where a say a 5-10 minute door conversation could grasp your attention?
Sure. Well, so right, and that's why the internet isn't sufficient in and of itself, right? Because if I see something thought provoking, because there's a difference between things that are on the internet that are not thought provoking and things that are. Mm-hmm. So if I see something online thought provoking, or like people show memes to one another, people do the same things with videos that make them think. Mm-hmm. There have been so many times where my friends send me videos like, "Oh, I saw this video on this philosopher. What do you think?" Or I saw this guy talking about this political idea. How do you view that? And like then it becomes the discussion of the table, mm-hmm. right? And I think it's the same way with the internet. Is you see something that is thought provoking, and then it becomes something you will often discuss with people in your day to day. And if we want to talk about the context of a non-internet, no internet, but door-to-door ministry. In that context, they're not having, a Muslim guy come door to door. You might have a Mormon guy coming door to door, but you're not seeing the Buddhists and the Muslims go door to door. And so you're only getting the one influence primarily, and that's why there's going to be more success from that. So the internet casts a wider net,
that's why it's called the internet.
Right. It casts a wider net, and so you might reach more people. However, those intimate conversations still need to happen, mm-hmm. right? I'm not saying that an atheist seeing a Bible verse online is going to be like, "Oh, gotta go to church now." But I am saying that putting information out there, people like to argue. Like I've seen more people come to faith through watching Christian debates than a ton of things. Like I've seen so many people, I've seen so many atheists try and disprove Christianity, and then they go watch a debate and they're like, okay, this might have some validity to it, like, and sometimes it goes the other way too, right? But there's a sense in which it doesn't stop at the internet. It then has to progress into the interpersonal discussions. The benefit with door to door is it starts there. So that's the one advantage it has over the internet. I just think generally, especially with people in the Midwest, that's not going to have the impact that might be desired, even though some people might be saved.
And if I can touch on what you were talking about, the short attention span thing. You're scrolling through TikTok, funny video, Taylor Swift, Ghostbusters, preacher saying something interesting. Mm-hmm. I would argue that in itself could be a good thing because, it's a break from the norm because you're used to seeing funny video, Ghostbusters, Star Wars meme, Taylor Swift.
You got a lot of Taylor Swift on your phone, Dave. I don't know what your TikTok seems a little off to me, pal.
But then preacher who has something interesting to say, I think, and not everybody's going to be called to do this, but it would be important to find a preacher who can grab someone's attention in the first 2 seconds mm-hmm. and be like, have you ever thought about this? That's
why you got to lead with a slur, right? You lead with the slur, and then you get them grabbed, and you tell them about Jesus. No, I'm kidding.
So while I agree that we have a short attention span and we're constantly scrolling through TikTok or Facebook or whatever, it could also be a tool because if you see something interesting from a man of faith, you might stop and actually watch that video or listen to what he's got to say.
The other thing is people don't read. Like, I read a lot. Just because it's within the nature of what I do, I have to, but a lot of people nowadays, people don't just sit down and read books. People don't even like reading news articles because they're too long. And so, but people will listen to podcasts or they'll listen to online sermons or whatever. And I think that there's a sense in which the internet helps with getting difficult concepts in a digestible format for people who are just not going to read. Mm-hmm. And, like, even in a door-to-door context, like you hand out maybe a pamphlet, right? Which is good because you might not have the time to cover everything because you got to get to the next house, so read this pamphlet. They might not read it.
Right.
They might just be too lazy to not read your pamphlet. And that's where I think like communal stuff comes in, because if you're in the process of serving a community, you'll have like with that's normally a process that takes hours, and you'll have more time to have deeper discussions than just very quick door-to-door interactions. But again, it's not horrible. It's just not what I would deem as ideal.
Mm-hmm. And I think where I because I want to ask this question kind of like just for you to expound on.
Sure.
Definitely not trying to do this for like an argument or anything like that. It's like but you talk about, like you said something earlier that kind of just hit with me, of having those intimate conversations with people about God, or it's like sharing memes or verses with people, and having your friends talk about it. Where my thought is, and I know that we live in the day and age where there are very, very few people that have not heard about God. Now, we couldn't say that 100 years ago. We couldn't say that 200 years ago. I mean, obviously there were people in the world that have never even knew anything about God, and because of missionaries and evangelists and and things like that, they were able to hear. But now, because of the internet, because of social media and stuff like that, it's there, it's out there, it's everywhere.
The problem is it's also just as ubiquitous that Christians are hypocrites.
Right.
And that's the image that goes around the internet.
Right. And it does. My thought, or my question is, okay, let's say somebody has never stepped foot in a church before.
Sure.
And, how do you get, and I'm not trying to do this because I know we talked about like, indoctrination and things like that, and, getting them there for numbers, but how do you get those people who have never even thought about stepping foot in a church to actually come to church, to actually want to sit down and talk about God, to actually want to sit down and hear, a conversation about God? That's where, and for me, that's where I believe door to door really is effective, because there are some people who that I've talked to that have said, it's like, well, it's like, I've always thought about going to church, but I've never met anybody that's actually gone to a church. And us being able to go out and just visit them, meeting them for the first time, telling them about the church, telling them about what we are, what we do, was a door opener, quite literally, of them attending church for the first time. Even if they came just once, it was a way for them to get in the door and see what church is all about, see what being a Christian is about. So taking that particular stance right there, what are your thoughts about trying to get people, again, that may never even think about going to church, of getting them to attend if you're never actually inviting them to church?
You are.
How?
In all of the examples we gave, that conversation's happening. I was saying more about particularly the doctrine, because if you get someone to, if someone affirms Christian truth, they are more likely to go to church. I mean, I was focusing more on having the important discussions about the essential truths of the faith, more than asking them to go to church. But yeah, that would show up in those discussions, those interpersonal discussions, and in those in the service where you are going out to meet people, just as you are in the door to door. You're just not doing it at people's homes, going directly to their homes. Now, there's also ways in which you can minister by going directly to someone's home without just going door-to-door ministry. So you can put service with door-to-door ministry. One of the ways you can do that is in the fall, raking leaves. That's one of the things we used to do with my old churches. We'd get the youth group together. They would rake leaves, and then they would ask people if they had any, they would essentially give them a handout and talk to them at the door. And that way we're serving the community. We're just showing them we love them, right? Even if they don't come to church. So, you can do things similar to door. I don't think it's bad. I'm not anti it. I just don't think it is ideal. And I think it rubs a lot of people the wrong way.
particularly in this day and age. I think we
Right.
already said that once, but
Right. But also most of the people going door to door, like most of the people they're talking to, and like most Christians in America, are uncatechized. They're uneducated. And so the idea, like one of the things you said was the average person knows about God. Yeah, but the average person has a wrong perception of God, right? So you may have a perception of God or a view even on Christianity, but it's most likely an askew one. And so having an askew perspective is, not any better than having no knowledge. You could say there's even a benefit to being ignorant on things like that because we are held to what we know. So knowing less is sometimes safer than knowing more, even though I definitely think you should try and learn things.
right.
I'm not saying there's no benefit to door. I just think generally the other methods are more ideal. But that's just my personal opinion. Yeah, invite people to church.
Yeah.
And don't be shy to do it either. Like you don't have to wait for your friends to ask you a question. You just be like, "Hey man, you want to go to church?" And they're like, "No." You just be like, "Okay." like it doesn't have to be, and maybe that's not the best example of how to do it, but I'm saying you feel free to invite people to church, feel free to have conversations with strangers. That's fine. I'm just saying I don't think it produces in all cases a deep contemplative knowledge-based faith. Because and it also is very dependent upon the person who's going door to door. I would trust you with doing that because you have a theological education in a way differently than I would the average Christian. Just says, I'm going to go do this. My pastor said we're doing this, so we're going to go do this. It's like, well, okay, but, so I think it depends a lot on who's doing it and how it's being done also.
I think too, where we may be differing a little bit, and it's like, because I've been in that position where it's like, yeah, I didn't know a whole lot, or I've been with a new Christian,
Sure,
and I say new Christian, somebody who just recently has accepted Christ, and they'll go out and they'll tell people, and it's like they may not be able to walk you through the steps of faith, they may not be able to talk to you about the Trinity, but they're there literally just to be like, hey, we're from blah blah blah, church. We're out just meeting new people. We want to invite you, and that's as far as the conversation goes.
Right, and I don't think it's malicious at all. I think it's a good thing overall. I don't think it's bad. I think it's not ideal. And so if you love Jesus, go tell people that. Like, I'm not gonna say don't do that.
Well,
right?
yeah, for sure.
So
For sure. I do want to kind of move on just a little bit here, and kind of move to the next part. And here's something that I want to ask both of you guys. We talk about, almost leading by example. It's like if you want to reach people for God, you go out and you do the things that a Christian should do. You go to help them. You go to witness. You talk to them about God. You talk to them about, it's like, you try to soul win, is the old phrase of it, of, leading somebody to Christ. And sometimes you have to do that by your example, because again, you may be the closest thing to, I got to be careful how I say this. You may be the closest thing to Christ that anybody's ever going to see.
Sure.
So leading into that and leading into our conversation as far as the way that some people are in the church, where do you draw the line of the old you versus the you now? And what I mean by this is I will see videos, and again, we talk about the internet, we talk about TikTok, Facebook. I'll see videos where people will spend 5 minutes talking about all of the stuff they used to do and 1 minute talking about what God's done for them now. Wrong, right? Like how do people feel about this? I'll let you guys discuss it, and then I'll give my opinion on it, and we can move on from there. But what do you think? And if I need to clarify it, I can.
So you mean people oversharing about who they were before conversion
Yes.
instead of focusing on their new life in Christ?
Yes.
Yeah, well, so like, I think there's a sense in which, you talk about the old life so they can see the contrast, right? But the primary way that evangelism really happens is through not show. People know the world's dirty. Like, people know the world's jacked up and that you're jacked up and that they're jacked up. You don't have to prove it to them, right? And so people are generally pessimistic, especially nowadays. I think the emphasis should be on the actual positive doctrine of the gospel itself, rather than just, hey, like, here's 30 minutes of the story of how I used to do drugs and then I met Jesus. Now I don't do drugs anymore. And then the sermon's over, or the speech, whatever. But there's a phrase, and I don't entirely agree with it, but there's some truth to it. And the phrase is, preach the gospel, if necessary, use words. And what that's getting at is the gospel is preached through holy living. Now, use words frequently because people have questions, right? And you need to be able to answer some of those questions. And you need to tell, if you're trying to bring people to Jesus, telling them who he is tends to help. But there's a sense in which holy living and emphasizing the positive aspects of the faith, I think, is more important than dwelling on who we were before. And we can kind of discourage ourselves by dwelling so much on our sinful past. I don't think God wants you to just constantly be dwelling on who you used to be. There's a sense in which you can't forget that, but you need to move forward in spite of that, right? And so I think the emphasis should be on the positive rather than the negative.
Okay.
I don't think it's entirely wrong to witness about, your own personal struggles and how the Lord has helped you. It just has to be done tactfully. Like, you don't want to sales pitch it like, oh, I like a weight loss program, like, oh, I started eating nothing but vinegar and Jolly Ranchers and I lost 36 pounds. Like, you don't want to talk about God in that way. Like, oh, I came to Jesus and all of a sudden all my problems were solved. He's not going to solve all of your problems. He's going to help you,
Right?
but you still have to solve your own dang problems yourself. So you got to be careful when you preach that way.
You're gonna lose a lot of weight with just vinegar and Jolly Ranchers.
With the Jolly Ranchers, my blood sugar is going to skyrocket, though.
Yeah, but that vinegar will help you get it all out.
So, there's not a lot of protein in this diet.
Is that how it works?
I don't know if I could do it without. There's not like enough nutrients.
Yeah,
it just seems like, well, it's just Jolly Ranchers or vinegar. So.
Yeah, I need some like beef flavored Jolly Ranchers or something.
Oh gosh, isn't that just like a bouillon cube?
I think so.
You know what I mean? Like,
that's basically what it is.
Hey kids, for Halloween I got beef flavored Jolly Ranchers.
Oh.
You just give them a bouillon cube.
Oh, soak it in water for 5 minutes.
Oh.
And I kind of agree with the both of you on that. I believe that you shouldn't dwell on where you were, because that is kind of a sales pitch of, it's like I've heard people and I've seen it on videos. I've seen it, people at the church, it's like, oh, I lived a life of sin. I was with this person and this person and this person, and I lived with this person for a while, and
stop naming
we did
them.
This type of drugs. We did, and we did all of this and we did all of this, but I got saved and now I'm in church. That was it. They literally spent their entire time talking about all of the stuff that they used to do, and their lead up was, oh, I got saved. Okay, that's great, but tell us what's happening now.
Yeah,
if you want somebody to believe that you are out of that sin, if you want somebody to believe that God has completely changed your life around, in my opinion, this is just my personal opinion, you can say, I lived a life. I was, promiscuous. I was into drugs. I was into alcohol. But let me tell you what God's done after that. And you can go into, because I have accepted Christ, my life has completely changed. Yes, I still struggle with the temptation, but I'm out of, 5 years sober. I'm, I've not touched cigarettes or drugs within, this many years. I'm married and I have, kids, and we all attend church. We all are, in the ministry as far as wanting to do things in the church, that type of thing. And to me, that is more of a selling. And again, for the lack of a better term, that's more of a selling point for wanting to get out of that old life. For somebody who may have, never really thought about going to church or never really thought about accepting Christ, that's more of a point of, leading them to Christ, other than just being, I did all of this and now I'm here.
Yeah, I also think it was interesting is kind of the shallowness of some stories. Not saying like I don't know if you guys have ever had it before where you're in a like people are sharing their testimonies. People try to one up one another. It's like guys, we're all broken. Shut up. That's kind of how I feel about it.
I'm more broken than you.
Yeah, like I'm kind of I don't think it's wrong for people to share their testimonies, but when people make it an event, I keep mine very brief. I'm just like, I was raised in the church. I love Jesus. He helped me out a lot. Next, your turn. Like that's kind of.
Yeah, don't go on about your new car and your big shiny house, and all of a sudden you got a new job. Like, don't sales pitch it.
Jesus gave me a car, but the
I invited 50 people to church.
Yeah, it's not a numbers game, guys.
Right.
The other thing is shallowness of the story. What I meant by that is, okay, so I had X person had a conversion experience. Okay, you had a conversion experience, and then, oh, that's the end. Well, I know you converted 15 years ago, so that can't be the end of the story.
Yeah, what'd you do in the last 15 years? What'd you do in the last 5 years? What's your daily life?
What happened this month?
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm sure Jonathan can attest to in the Christian life is every day is a battle.
Right.
Some days are better than others. But there's always something. Life is hard. And when you live on this planet, you're always wrestling with something, whether it's big or small.
Yeah. Hardship isn't just going to go away because you found Jesus.
Exactly. Right. But the way a lot of these testimonial contexts work is the story ends with saying yes to Christ in a sense. And it doesn't get into the actual walking with Christ and the being conformed to be more Christ-like. So
I agree completely. I think to me, the testimonies that speak more to my heart are the ones that are, it's like, hey, I've been saved for 15 years. And, let me tell you what I read what I read today and how it spoke to my heart. Let me tell you about, it's like I, was walking through the park and just happened to see a butterfly and my heart broke and I, accepted Christ as my savior at that point. And I mean, and yeah, it's kind of a different, kind of a odd example right there, but it's those type of testimonies, it's those types of stories that honestly draw my heart closer to God, because yeah, okay, I understand that you have lived a life and it's been a struggle. But if you want me to draw closer to God, talk about that. And, and again, like what we just said, of it's got to come down, it comes down to okay, I'll give an example because this is something that I thought about for a while. I was struggling with depression. I've been struggling with it for a while. Okay. About 2 years or so ago, I was at work and I was mowing the field next to our work. For these two guys that know where the field that I'm talking about, I'm in the field and I'm mowing and I'm kind of going through that depression mode. And I kid you not, I run over a baby rabbit. Okay. Now, it's sad. The baby rabbit. Okay.
Yeah, you're right. It's sad, not funny. Sorry for laughing.
I'm not joking when I say that I literally stopped the mower and for 5 minutes cried my heart out.
Yeah.
Because of this. And it's just it's a baby rabbit. I know there's a lot of people that are out there like, oh, the poor rabbit and blah, blah, blah. That's not what I was crying about. Honestly, at that moment, I sat there and it's like God hit my heart and said, you could go just like that. And how would you be remembered? And to me, it's like, again, I've already, I've had already accepted Christ. I've already been in church. I've already, grown up listening to the word of God, of speaking to, praying to God and having God speak to me. Literally at that moment, it hit me harder than it had in years of my life could be over just like that. And it's like, would I be remembered? And I'm not saying that that I want to be remembered as, some great person, blah, blah, blah. But would I be remembered by the people around me as somebody who lived for Christ, or somebody who, for the lack of a better analogy, fluffed out because of the way that I was living?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that there's a sense in which you can know a fact about something, or even about a doctrine, and not have God apply it to you in the same way at certain times, right? So that was you recognizing the frailty of life and having a new understanding about the gospel because of that. And that's the thing, is like, it's not all instantaneous. Even once you understand a concept, it doesn't mean you've incorporated the concept into how you live, right? And I think at that moment, it was just how certain and how certain death is and how frail human life is. And then applying that to you and how that affects you, it hit you different in that point. You would have, if someone asked you whether you thought that before, you would have said yes. But it took the experience and that happening for you then to work it into how you live. Right. And so there's a sense in which, a lot of people say, oh yeah, I believe in Jesus. But then it's the issue of actually walking. And nobody's going to do it perfectly, but actually striving to live a holy life is what matters. And the other thing I wanted to say is, like, we're talking about faith, but God does not just want magic words. He doesn't want people to just say the right words. He wants people who have faith to be faithful, to walk in the faith. The faith is, we can describe it as trusting in a set of certain truths, but it's also, there's a sense in which the faith, describing the whole Christian life, is something that's lived out. And so not saying we're saved by works. That's not my theology. That's not my position. But we are called to do good works, and it is beneficial for us to do them.
Okay. I want to ask one more question, and then, we will wrap all this up.
Okay.
Something that's kind of like weighed on my heart a little bit today, of if we could go back, all right, now I'm saying, like, as a people, as a Christian people, if we could go back to any point in the Christian life, do you believe that the world would be the way that it is right now?
Do you mean all of history or America?
America.
Okay. Go back in time and try and change it? Is that what you're saying?
Well, let me preference this by saying, it's like, we look at the way the world is now. We look at the way that, the things that are being taught in our schools. And I know that we, had talked last time about the children in the church, but not just in the church. I'm talking now, like in the homes, now in the schools. Back in the 50s, it was common practice to do the Pledge of Allegiance and a prayer in the public schools. And it's like, then it's like in the way that all of this stuff happens for the history people, that there was a big uproar about it because of one woman believing that her children shouldn't have to put themselves into an act of prayer if they don't believe in God. And that started a big movement, started a big uproar. And so prayer was taken out of the church. Sorry. Well, okay.
Then the government stepped in and said, no praying.
No, I'm sorry. I meant that prayer was taken out of the schools. Prayer was taken out of, the homes. But I preference all of that to say that it didn't start with prayer being taken out of the church. Prayer being taken out of the schools. It starts by prayer being taken out of the church. And what I mean by that is we get in this mode where we recite prayers. We don't pray from the heart. We don't pray, for other people. We literally are kind of in this ritualistic where we say the same words over and over again and expect God to bless. And because of that, it makes people become complacent. They stop praying at home, or they pray a prayer that they don't believe, or that they've said so many times that it has no effect to them.
Yeah, I actually, this is like one of those topics that we might have some difference on. So I think vain repetition is wrong. It's like, I just go through the motions, blah, blah, blah. I'm just praying because it's what I do, right? That's wrong. But I actually am a big proponent of written prayer, like already written prayers, especially within the life of the church. I think the memorization of certain prayers and certain creeds is very helpful for teaching, especially young people. People will not always remember what the pastor said on Sunday, but they are more likely to remember what they heard in a song, or what they pray every Sunday, or what they pray every morning. Not that that's mandatory, but I think there's some benefit to ritual in that ritual helps with education and helps with understanding, and that's the bent I have towards it. Even though I do understand there can be an issue with ritual, I generally am for having written prayers, and I would say even the Psalms are in a sense that praying the Psalms, reading the Psalms is or singing the Psalms is, obviously it's not written by man, it's written by God, but there's a sense in which even the scriptures have written prayers. They shouldn't be done in a ritualistic sense where there's no genuine feeling behind it, but I think ritual has not vain ritual, but meaningful ritual has a lot of benefit to it. But I also think the issue with schools is, well, we live, and this is also where you guys are going to disagree with me. We live in a democracy or a republic, a non authoritarian state, right? Well, we do kind of now, but that's beside the point. If we are going to want prayer in school, which I'm for, and you live in a state that does not have a state religion and permits other religions, you have to permit those other religions to do the same thing. Now, there's been a cultural shift because Christianity was the predominant religion. It still is generally, but there's more influence from outside religions and atheism now than there was then. Now, what is this? Now, what we would say the solution to that is different. I personally don't believe that a government can function with multiple religions. I think that that's a setup for disaster. And so I have the controversial opinion. I think I think the state has a responsibility to its people's spiritual well-being, and that the permittance of other religions outside of the religion the state has adopted is detrimental. I know that's not a popular opinion, but if you want prayer back in school, you can't have a system that cares more about freedom than religion. Mm-hmm. I am one of those people who, controversially, I don't think freedom of religion is a good idea. I don't think anyone should be treated poorly. I don't think anyone should be harmed. I'm not a terrorist, but I don't think freedom of religion is a good idea for any society, even a society that might disagree with my religion. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's good for them to have a religion that's contrary, which is why, like, for example, in Japan, when the Christians went over there, the Japanese government was like, well, we have to kill these guys because they think differently, and that's going to destroy our society. So that's like how they thought. Now, I'm not saying we should hurt anyone, but I'm saying there is a sense in which we can't, with that system, we can't be upset with other people not wanting that in the school, mm-hmm. which is the downfall of that system, in my opinion. So I'm sorry, I ran a little long there. Dave, if you have anything.
I thought I did, and then you kept going, and I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
Well, and where my thought of it is, and where my question is at what point? Okay, we know that Catherine O'Hara was the woman who was the one who was predominantly against prayer in the school. She was the one who started the whole movement of removing God from the public schools. And where I do at a point agree with you where you said that, if you're going to allow one religion to hold a prayer, you should allow other religions. I mean, I'm not.
I don't think that.
Well, the way that you kind of said, I think the way the system is, that, yeah. Where it's kind of like what I want to ask is, do you think at what point did it become the church's downfall of the public school? And what I mean by that is it has to start somewhere. It didn't start by one woman just getting mad and throwing a big fit. Something led her to that point.
Yeah. I think it's a systemic problem. The second you have a country that allows for freedom of religion, and then they have a public school system, the issue is implicit in that. So as soon as the public schools were founded in a mostly Christian society, demographics were prone to shift, and it was inevitable. So as soon as you had the public schools instituted, from there it was over, right? So I would say, right, as soon as you have public schools, it's inevitable that it's going to be an issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Dave, you have anything to add?
Not really.
No. All right. I truly believe that, it's a very common belief. Now I know it's not just mine, of the way this country is and the way we are headed is completely in the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. I am old school, and I believe that a true old-fashioned revival needs to happen. But it comes down to the point of it's not a revival in the sense of we need, preachers that are going to sit there and preach for 2 hours at a time and yell at you, and we're gonna hold services all week long, and then we're gonna go home and just live the way that we've been living. Mm-hmm. It comes down to once again, I'm going to quote my old pastor, at the heart of the matter, it's a matter of the heart. It has to come to the point where Christians have the heart to decide that, okay, we are no longer going to do the things we've been doing. Mm-hmm. We're no longer going to allow our children to do the things that we've been doing. If you want your children to change, it starts with you.
I agree.
If people want our community to change, it starts with us. It starts with the church. It starts with the heart of, an individual, just like it started with a one individual that caused all of prayer to be taken out of the public school system. If we want hearts turned back to God, it's going to take individually our hearts turning to God to be able to lead others. One of my the greatest things that I remember is and it's actually my namesake, is who I was named after. Jonathan Edwards was a pastor, is evangelist, sorry. And he preached a sermon, and it was, I remember like growing up hearing this, because the title of the sermon was "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." And you hear that you hear the title of that message, and if you were to read the message, because they're in little books, I have one of the books at home that is the entire message word for word of what he said. It makes you think that he was rip-roaring, that he was, yelling and screaming, and it just caused all of these people to basically turn out of fear. When in reality,
he's the diabetic preacher. You know why? I'm sorry, I hate to cut you off, but I wanted to say this because I know where you're going with this. I call him the diabetic preacher because in his sermons, he used the word sweet to describe God and God's love more than anything else.
Yes, and he did.
Yeah.
And he used the word sweet. But the thing about him is during the time that he gave that message, it was 9-10 o'clock at night. They didn't have the electricity. He literally sat there with a candle and read word for word the exact way we're talking right now. Read word for word every single word of that message. And thousands of people turn their life over to God because of that. And it didn't take him yelling, it didn't take him screaming. Now I'm all for, if you're passionate about it, and sometimes it helps get your message across to get excited and get animated about it. But then sometimes it takes just that simple, calm voice to be able to get the heart's attention. You hear the story of Elijah looking for an answer from God, and God put him on the top of a mountain, and there was a strong wind, there was an earthquake, there was a fire, there was all of this stuff happening, and the verse says, it's like there was a fire, but God wasn't in the fire. There was an earthquake, but God wasn't in the earthquake. There was a tornado, but God wasn't in the tornado. But then there was a still small voice. And that was God speaking to Elijah during all of this stuff, all of this distractions, all of this raging and roaring going on. And then here's the still small voice of God speaking. In order for us as a people, as a society, as a church, to get back to the way that God desires us to be and the way that God wants us to be, sometimes it takes that still small voice. But we have to open up our hearts to listen. Sometimes you have to get away from technology, sometimes you have to get away from the church services, the rituals, the religion and things like that. Sometimes it takes literally being by yourself, mowing in the middle of a field, and seeing life taken in an instant, even though it was just, again, it was a small animal. It took that point for God to really hit me. Versus, it's like, yeah, I drove to work that day listening to my Bible app. I spent, a few minutes in prayer during that day. It's like asking God to speak to me, asking God to work, and praying over the situation that I was in at the time. But it took that one small spot, that one thing, for God to really just kind of be like, all right, now you're ready to listen. And And I say this, and I know it's kind of repeating it, but it's going to take that, I honestly believe, in the desire of every single Christian's heart to hear that small voice in order for our lives, in order for the churches, in order for the community, and for ultimately the country and the world to come back to God. This has been a very insightful conversation that we've had.
I was half expecting you to end with "in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit." Amen.
Amen.
You sound like a preacher, dude.
It's almost like he has an education in that.
This has been very insightful. Dave and I were talking about this earlier. When Noah wasn't here at the moment. We have enough information. We have enough stuff that we could carry this into a part 3 if we really wanted to, and we might pick it up at some point.
Maybe take a little break from this.
Yes, we'll take it. We'll take a break from this, but again, I say this every single time to our listeners. Let us know what you think. Let us know your thoughts, your viewpoints. We want to know. It's like all three of us, I'm fairly sure all three of us are in agreement that there is no judgment in how you believe and what you think. Because again, that is the freedom of this country, is we are allowed.
Noah's going to judge you.
Yeah, Noah might judge you, but
No, I'm not going to judge you. I'm fine. No, I love all people, even people who have wrong opinions. Like me, I'm wrong sometimes.
Well, and that's the thing is we all have an opinion.
Yeah,
we all have a different viewpoint. You may not agree with everything that we've said here. We may not agree with everything that you say, but as a Christian, we're gonna love you no matter what. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm glad we had this conversation. We look forward to hearing your input on part 1 and part 2 of this series. This will not be the last religious discussion that we have, but I'm glad that we had this one. Mm-hmm. Truthfully and honestly. So again, thank you all for listening. My name is John.
I'm Dave.
And I'm Noah.
Have a great night.